All right, this tutorial is hopefully just a short little video that'll help you converting percentages to fractions. And I guess I'd start out by telling you the reason we recorded this video or we picked this topic was we had a student recently, one of our own students in the high school here, that was asked on a college readiness test to convert 47.5% to a fraction. It was a problem. We looked back at what our students have done. It was commonly missed, and we're hoping that by doing this video and giving a little bit of help that maybe we can help all of you convert percentages to fractions. So as we do this, to start with, I'm going to start with the problem 67%. And if we were asked to take 67% and to convert it to a fraction, how do we do that? Well, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to show you what this actually means. So if we have 67, and we have the word percent, I've kind of split the per and the cent just a little bit there, if you can tell. And the reason is that each of those words means something. This problem has the word PER in it, and per actually means divided by. And CENT is the prefix that means 100. So when you say 67%, you are really saying 67 divided by 100. I call this a division problem that's written horizontally, but if we want to change it just a little bit, we can certainly write this problem as 67 divided by 100. This is still division, it's just written vertically, but it's also a fraction. So simply by saying this correctly and understanding that PER means divided by and CENT means 100, we have already changed 67% to 67 divided by 100. Now I get it, sometimes you may not be sure if the fraction is in simplest terms, so what I would urge you to do if that were the case is simply to say, let's try taking 67 divided by 100 on our calculator. And at that point, the calculator is going to say 0.67, so it's changed it to a decimal, and then you can ask it to change it back to a fraction. So on a graphing calculator, you can go to the math menu, convert to fraction, and when you convert it back, it will always give you the fraction in simplest terms. So in this case, it would come back and say that the fraction is 67 over 100, which was the same fraction that we originally got. This percentage does not happen to simplify. Let's take something, we'll jump to a different page here. Let's take a percentage such as 24%. And let's assume that we're asked to take 24% and convert it to a fraction. Again, remember it's 24, and again I'll split that word up, percent, write it two different ways. This is 24 divided by 100, and I'm going to skip the horizontal part, and I'm simply going to go to that. That's our answer. The only problem is that it might not be in simplest form. So what do we do to change it to simplest form? Again, here is where I would say to you, you could let the calculator, you could take 24 divided by 100 on your calculator. It's going to give you 0.24, and then you could ask it to convert back to a fraction. And when you do so, I believe this one comes back and will say 6/25 is 24 over 100 in simplest form. Now if we think about it from the other standpoint, simplifying a fraction by hand, we can look at this and say what goes into the top and the bottom, what common number, what is the greatest common factor for 24 over 100? Well, it happens to be 4, and 4 goes into the top 6 times, and 4 goes into the bottom 25 times, and simply by finding that greatest common factor, we're able then to simplify 24 over 100 to 6/25. So there's a simple way to do it. Now let's take it a step further and let's start to challenge ourselves a little bit with something like 28.3%. It seems to go pretty well when it's 67% or 24%, but what about if we put a percentage up there and it has a decimal in it? Well, again, I would remind you that when you do this, you are saying 28.3%, so you are really saying 28.3 divided by 100. Now, that answer is the fraction that would give you the correct value. The only thing is that we have to remember we shouldn't really have a decimal inside of a fraction. So in this case, again, I would urge you to take 28.3 on our calculators divided by 100. It's going to come up as 2.283, and when we convert it back to a fraction, it should give us that fraction in simplest form. Now, in this case, we'll see if it turns out to be this, but I believe that's going to come back as 283 over 1,000. Let's look at what would happen if we did this by hand. Well, if we did this by hand, the problem is that we have a decimal up here. If I want to slide that decimal one spot to the right, I could say to myself, I'd really like to multiply the top by 10. So if I multiply the top by 10, that moves the decimal one spot to the right, which gives me the number 283. I'm allowed to do that as long as I also multiply the bottom by 10. And when I multiply the bottom by 10, that's going to slide the decimal over so that I then have 1,000. The reason I can do that is if I opt to multiply the top by 10 and I opt to multiply the bottom by 10, if you think of this as a fraction, I've multiplied the top by 10 and the bottom by 10. 10 over 10 is 1. I've really multiplied this fraction by 1, which we know when we multiply by 1, we really aren't changing the value of the fraction. We're just changing the way it looks. Now notice, same answer I had over here, and pretty sure that that's in simplest form. If I'm not positive, I can certainly take 283 divided by 1,000 in my calculator and then convert it back to a fraction, hopefully in simplest form. So let's then look at the problem that our student encountered on the college readiness exam. What about 47.5%? My suggestion to you would be to take the 47.5% and hopefully you recognize right away that that 1/2 is the same as 0.5. And if it were me, I love to go and change that and make that 47.5%. And if I do that, I'm going to do what I simply did in the previous problem. I'm going to have 47.5 divided by 100. There's my fraction. The only problem is I have a decimal in this, so I'm going to grab my calculator here, and on my calculator, 47.5 divided by 100, excuse me there, divided by 100. I shouldn't have needed a calculator for that because that simply slides the decimal 2 spots left, which is 0.475. But now the nice thing is I will use math, convert it to a fraction, and it comes back and says 19/40 would be the fraction in simplest form. So as much as this is the correct fraction, it's just not necessarily the fraction we have. If, in this case, you opted to simply say, well, I'm going to put 47.5 over 100, you opted to leave the mixed number here, 47.5 divided by 100, that certainly should be correct. The only thing is now you need to, in your calculator, handle 47.5 divided by 100, and as long as you handle that correctly, you should end up with 19/40. The last one that I wanted to deal with was, what about a percentage that was something like 150%? And again, I would just tell you, remember this is 150%, so it should be 150 divided by 100. There's our fraction. Hopefully we recognize right away, just based on the fact that they end in zeros, that we do have some things in common. In fact, I believe 50 goes into the top 3 times, 50 goes in the bottom 2 times. There is the fraction 3/2 that is the same as 150%, and 3/2 is in simplest form. So really when it comes to changing and converting percentages to fractions, the bottom line is we simply need to take the number that we have here divided by 100. And if you look at this symbol, that symbol, as much as it's the percent symbol divided by 100, it almost looks like divided by, and a couple of zeros to remember that you're simply dividing by 100. Hopefully that helps. Obviously, if you still need more help, make sure that you ask your instructor to get a little bit extra help. Thank you.